Have you ever felt so tired, so exhausted inside, that you questioned whether God was still there? Elijah, the prophet who defied kings and made fire descend from heaven, also went through this. And what happened to him during the darkest moment of his life may be exactly what you need to hear today. This is the story of Elijah, the prophet who defied kings and was restored in silence. An ordinary man who faced the impossible, witnessed miracles, but also knew the weight of loneliness, fear, and spiritual exhaustion. At the height of his victory, he wanted to give it all up. But it was precisely there, at rock bottom, hidden in a cave and fleeing from his enemies, that Elijah discovered something that would change everything. The way God speaks when the whole world seems to have fallen silent. And this discovery is not just ancient history, it can completely transform the desert you are crossing right now. So take a deep breath. The journey begins the moment the sky closes in, the earth dries up, and a single man rises against an entire empire. Israel was dying, not only physically, but spiritually. The people had abandoned the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to bow down before Baal, a false god of wood and stone. And at the center of this tragedy, seated on the throne, was King Ahab, a weak man, manipulated by his wife Jezebel, a cruel and power-hungry woman. Idolatry was not merely a distant sin, it was institutionalized. Prophets of the Lord were murdered. Sacred altars were destroyed. The entire nation was walking toward darkness, and no one seemed to care. The sky was closed. There was no rain, no dew. The land cried out in thirst, and the people cried out in hunger. It was in this scenario of chaos and despair that God called a man, not a king, not a general. A simple man from the region of Tishbe, someone that history would never have noticed if God hadn't chosen him to face the impossible. That man was Elijah, the prophet. Elijah had no army, he had no political influence, he had no wealth, but he had something that no king or queen could buy. He had the word of God, and that word was about to shake an entire empire. The heavens may be closed in your life right now. Perhaps you are surrounded by forces that seem invincible. But remember, when God calls, He doesn't choose the prepared. He prepares the chosen. And the story of Elijah is only beginning. The palace doors swung open. The hall was filled with luxury, gold, and the arrogance of those who believe themselves to be above everything and everyone. On the throne, Ahab. Beside him, the imposing shadow of Jezebel. They ruled Israel with an iron fist, silencing any voice that dared to challenge them. And then a man entered, Elijah. Simply dressed, his skin tanned by the desert sun, his eyes fixed on the king. There was no fear in his gaze, no hesitation. He stepped into the center of the hall, and silence filled the room. Everyone waited. What did this man have to say? And then Elijah spoke. His voice echoed through the palace walls like thunder. As surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in these years, except at my word. That was it. It was done. There was no debate. There was no negotiation. The sentence was decreed. The heavens were officially closed and would only open when Elijah allowed it. The king was stunned. Jezebel was furious. Who was this man to defy the crown? But before they could react, Elijah had already left. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't apologize. He delivered God's message and departed. From that moment on, Elijah became public enemy number one man against an entire kingdom. While Ahab and Jezebel mobilized their soldiers to hunt him down, Elijah was already far away, but he wasn't running away out of fear. He was obeying, because God had given him an order: hide. And it is in hiding that the next lesson would be learned. The desert is silent. There are no crowds, no applause, only the wind, the stones, and the sound of running water. Elijah arrived at the brook Cherith, as God had commanded. There, far from everyone, he would live in hiding while the drought ravaged Israel. But living in hiding doesn't mean living abandoned. Every morning and every evening, ravens brought bread and meat to Elijah. Ravens, birds considered unclean by Jewish law. God was teaching something profound. He provides in ways you would never imagine. When the whole world seems to have turned its back on you, God uses the improbable to sustain his own. Elijah drank from the brook and ate the food brought by the ravens. Day after day, week after week, no news, no visible signs of victory, just the silent routine of total dependence. And then something happened. The water began to recede. The brook was drying up. Imagine the tension of that moment. Elijah had prophesied the drought. Now he himself was being struck by it. The river that sustained him was disappearing, and God silent. Until finally the voice came, "Arise, go to Zarephath. There I have commanded a widow to provide for you." Sometimes God places us in situations of total dependence so that we learn to trust him completely. The brook Cherith was not just a hiding place, it was a school. And Elijah was about to discover that the next lesson would be even more intense. Zarephath was not a city in Israel. It was Phoenician territory, land of Baal worshippers. And it was precisely there that God sent his prophet. When Elijah arrived at the city gate, he saw a widow gathering sticks. She was preparing what would be the last meal for her and her son. After that, all that would remain was to await death. Elijah asked for water. She went to get it. Then he asked for bread. And her answer cut through the air like a blade. "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread. I only have a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah looked at the desperate woman and said something impossible. "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me and bring it to me, and then make some for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." And she did it. Against all logic, she obeyed, and the miracle happened. The flour didn't run out, the oil didn't fail. Day after day, week after week, month after month, that small portion multiplied, sustained 3 lives in the midst of famine. But then the worst happened. The widow's son fell ill, and he died. The mother's pain was unbearable. She cried out to Elijah, "What do I have to do with you, man of God? Did you come to me to bring my iniquity to remembrance and kill my son?" Elijah took the boy in his arms, went up to the room, laid the body on the bed, and began to pray. It wasn't a polite prayer. It was a desperate cry. "O Lord my God, will this child's life return to him?" He stretched himself out over the boy 3 times. He cried out, he insisted, and God heard him. The boy breathed. His eyes opened. He was alive. Before we continue, let me ask you one quick thing. If this story is touching you, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps more people discover the power of God through these stories. And now, let's return to Elijah, because his greatest battle is yet to come. The widow looked at Elijah and said, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." The miracle in the midst of the trial was not just for her. It was also for Elijah. He needed to know that the God who sustains in hiding also resurrects in the impossible. And this certainty would be crucial for what was about to happen. 3 years had passed. 3 years of drought. 3 years of famine. Israel was on its knees, and King Ahab was desperate. It was then that God commanded, "Go, present yourself to Ahab, for I will send rain upon the land." The time for hiding was over. The hour of confrontation had arrived. When Elijah and Ahab met, the king called him a troubler of Israel. But Elijah did not back down. "It is not I who trouble Israel, but you and your father's house, because you have forsaken the Lord's commands and followed the Baals." And then the prophet issued the challenge, "Gather all Israel to Mount Carmel, and also the 450 prophets of Baal." Mount Carmel was filled with people. On one side, 450 prophets of Baal, supported by the political and military power of the kingdom. On the other side, a single man, Elijah. And in the middle, the people, hesitant, divided, not knowing whom to believe. Elijah raised his voice. "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people remained silent. No one answered. Then Elijah proposed the test. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices. The prophets of Baal would call upon the name of their God. Elijah would call upon the name of the Lord. And the God who answered with fire, that would be the true God. The prophets of Baal began. They shouted. They danced. They cut themselves with knives until they bled. From morning until mid-afternoon, they cried out with growing despair, "Baal, answer us!" But there was no voice. There was no answer. There was no fire, only silence. When Elijah's turn came, he rebuilt the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He placed the wood, prepared the sacrifice. And then he did something amazing. He ordered water to be poured over everything, once, twice, 3 times. Until the water filled the trench around the altar, nothing could catch fire naturally. Then Elijah prayed. It wasn't a long prayer, it wasn't theatrical, it was simple, direct, full of faith. "Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things according to your word. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that this people may know that you, Lord, are God." And the fire came down, not an ordinary fire. A fire that consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, the dust, and even licked up all the water that was in the trench. The people fell face down on the ground and cried out, "The Lord is God! The Lord is God!" It was the greatest victory of Elijah's life, absolute triumph, divine vengeance against idolatry. But what he didn't know was that soon after the victory would come the fall. And this fall would be deeper than any desert. The news reached the palace quickly. The prophets of Baal were dead. The people had turned to the Lord, and Ahab told Jezebel everything. The queen did not weep. She did not panic. She did what she always did. She attacked. She sent a direct message to Elijah. "May the gods do to me whatever they please, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like the life of each one of them." Elijah received the threat, and something inside him broke. This man, who had faced a king without trembling, who had defied 450 prophets alone, who had made fire come down from heaven, this same man was now afraid. He fled. He left his servant behind and went alone into the desert. He walked all day under the scorching sun, until, exhausted, he sat down under a bush and uttered a prayer that we would never imagine coming from the mouth of a victorious prophet. "Enough, Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." Think about it. Yesterday, fire from heaven. Today, a desire to die. Yesterday, multitudes acknowledging that the Lord is God. Today, utter loneliness and a wish to give up. This is the brutal reality of spiritual burnout. Public victory does not immunize against the inner battle. Elijah slept, and while he slept, an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." Beside him was bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and went back to sleep. The angel returned a second time. "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." God did not rebuke Elijah. He did not call him a coward. He did not say, "You just saw fire come down from heaven and now you're afraid of a woman." No, God took care of him. He fed his exhausted body. Because sometimes the first thing a weary servant needs is not a scolding, it's bread and rest. Strengthened, Elijah walked 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. And it was there in a dark cave that he would finally find what his soul had been searching for, the voice of God in the silence. Elijah went into a cave and stayed there, alone, hidden, defeated inside. And then God asked, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" It was a strange question. God knew exactly why Elijah was there. But the question wasn't for God, it was for Elijah. And Elijah cried out, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too, alone." That was the key word. Elijah felt completely isolated, abandoned, as if he were the last faithful man on earth. And God was about to answer, but not in the way Elijah expected. "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." Elijah obeyed. And then came a strong and mighty wind, so violent that it split the mountains and shattered the rocks. But God was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But God was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire. But God was not in the fire. And after the fire, silence. A soft whisper, an almost imperceptible voice. And it was there, in that delicate breath, that Elijah heard the voice of God. He covered his face with his cloak and stood at the entrance of the cave. God asked again, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah repeated the same answer, but this time God did not debate. He simply gave new orders. "Go, return on your way. Anoint Hazael king over Syria, Jehu king over Israel, and Elisha prophet in your place. And I have left in Israel 7,000, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal." 7,000. Elijah thought he was alone, but God had 7,000 faithful followers hidden among him. The prophet was not the only one. He never was. His solitude was a lie, and the mission was not over. It was only beginning a new phase. God speaks in silence, not because he is weak, but because in silence we are compelled to be quiet and listen. Elijah expected thunder. He received a whisper, and it was in that whisper that his soul found healing. Elijah emerged from the cave transformed, not healed of all his wounds, but restored in his purpose. He had a new mission: to find Elisha, son of Shaphat, and anoint him as his successor. The journey of the solitary prophet was drawing to a close. It was time to pass on the mantle. When Elijah met Elisha, he was plowing the land with 12 yoke of oxen, a hard-working, ordinary man with nothing to distinguish him from the crowd. But God had chosen him. Elijah passed by him and threw his mantle over him. It was a simple gesture, but full of meaning. The mantle was the symbol of prophetic authority, and now it was upon Elisha. Elisha understood immediately. He left the oxen, ran after Elijah, and asked, "Let me kiss my father and mother, and then I will follow you." Elijah replied, "Go back, for what have I done to you?" It wasn't coldness, it was freedom. Elijah wasn't forcing anyone. The calling was real, but the choice had to be voluntary. Elisha returned, slaughtered the oxen, burned the plow, and used the wood to cook the meat, which he shared with the people. It was a final farewell. There would be no turning back. He was burning the bridges. And then he got up and followed Elijah, becoming his servant. For years, Elisha walked alongside Elijah. He learned from him. He served him. He observed every miracle, every confrontation, every moment of silence. And as they walked together, Elijah realized his story was not ending in defeat. It was multiplying. The legacy doesn't die when the prophet grows old. It expands when it's passed on. Elijah wasn't just ending his journey. He was planting seeds for the next generation. And what came next would be the most glorious conclusion a servant of God could have. The day had arrived. Elijah knew. Elisha knew. It was time to leave. They walked together from Gilgal to Bethel, then to Jericho, and finally to the Jordan River. 3 times Elijah tried to leave Elisha behind, saying, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to..." But 3 times Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as surely as you live, I will not leave you." When they reached the Jordan River, Elijah took off his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The river divided, and the 2 of them crossed over on dry ground. Elijah then asked Elijah, "Tell me what you want me to do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for fame. He asked, "May a double portion of your spirit be upon me." It was a bold request. Elisha didn't just want to continue Elijah's work. He wanted to do more, and Elijah replied, "You have asked a difficult thing. If you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so." As they were walking along and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire, which separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw it. He cried out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." And he saw him no more. Elijah did not die like other men. He was taken up, raptured, translated into the presence of God without passing through death. The prophet who once fled in fear, who wanted to give up under a bush, who hid in a cave, that same man now ascended gloriously to heaven in a chariot of fire. Elisha picked up the mantle that had fallen and returned to the Jordan. He struck the waters with the mantle and cried out, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And the waters parted. The spirit of Elijah rested on Elisha. The legacy continued. The flame did not go out. Elijah departed, but his message remains. Centuries later in the New Testament, he appeared alongside Moses on the Mount of Transfiguration, conversing with Jesus. Two giants of faith, side by side with the Messiah. Elijah has never been forgotten. His story echoes through the ages. But what makes Elijah's story so powerful isn't just the miracles. It's the falls, the crises, the moments of weakness, because it's precisely there that we realize Elijah was human like us. And if God restored Elijah, he can restore you. You who are tired, you who feel you can't take it anymore, you who have won public battles but are losing the internal struggle, you who are hiding in a cave, waiting to hear from God, but only find silence. Know this, God has not abandoned you. Sometimes God speaks through the wind, the earthquake, the fire, but other times he speaks in silence. And it is in silence that we learn to truly hear him, because when everything around us is noise, we don't need faith to follow. But when everything is silent, that's when faith is forged. The story of Elijah teaches us that victory is not the absence of falls. It is the courage to get up every time we fall. It is knowing that the God who made fire come down from heaven is the same God who sends bread to the weary prophet. It is understanding that God's calling does not end when we feel weak. In fact, that is when it deepens. So if you are going through your own desert right now, remember, God's silence is not absence. It is preparation. He is forging something in you that the noise of the world could never build. And when you emerge from this cave, you will not emerge alone. You will carry the mark of one who heard God in the most unlikely place. Elijah's fire never went out, and yours will not go out either. Elijah's journey shows us that serving God is not a road without obstacles. It is a walk full of confrontations, victories, falls, and restorations. But above all, it is a story of faithfulness. The faithfulness of God, who does not abandon his children, even when they want to give up. If this story touched you, leave a comment below telling us which part impacted your heart the most. Was it the confrontation on Mount Carmel, the cave of silence, the chariot of fire? Share with us, and if you need prayer, write as well. This is a faith community, and we are in this journey together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive more Bible stories that will strengthen your faith. Share this video with someone who is going through a difficult time and needs to be reminded that God still speaks in silence. And remember, you are not alone. Just as God had 7,000 faithful followers hidden when Elijah thought he was alone, he has an army of intercessors praying for you right now. Stay strong, keep trusting, because the same God who restored Elijah is the God who is with you at this moment. May the story of the prophet who defied kings and was restored in silence be a flame of hope in your life. Until the next video, may the peace of the Lord be with you.